Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly live podcast about the latest in the Ultimate World. I am Charlie Eisenhood, the editor. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner. Keith, hello and welcome to a new world of Deep Look. We got a new logo, we got a new live show, and it's happening every week, Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on YouTube.
Does it feel different to you yet? I mean, do you feel like we're in a brave new world of Deep Look?
Well, it does feel a little different because it's live. It feels like there's a little bit more pressure there. And you know what else we got new? We got the Ultiworld neon sign. So I'm excited.
Right.
I have more to do back here on my wall. I'm going to add a lot of discs, but I haven't quite gotten around to it yet. But Keith, so much to do on our first show of this new live era. Of course, we will be able to see your comments and questions in the YouTube chat. So please hit us up. And of course, if you're just a podcast listener on your podcast app of choice, nothing will change. You'll still be able to get the show every week. It should come out on Tuesday afternoons. Florida Warmup happened this past weekend. My favorite college regular season tournament of the year. And Keith, I mean, it was super exciting this year. No teams went undefeated. And it felt like we had more parity than we've had in a long time at this tournament.
Even the like chalky results, even when you got the chalk, like a lot of it came in an exciting fashion. We had a bunch of really dramatic games that had key impacts on how the bracket was going to shake out. And I know you're such a huge fan of the format that's being applied at this tournament. And I think that only enhanced the excitement and also just getting a first look at so many of these teams. There's just a lot to take in down in Tampa.
Georgia takes it down over Brown in the final. Brown had to win back-to-back 15-14 games to get into the final and then kind of ran out of steam against a Georgia team that looks better and deeper than I expected, Keith. They were a good team last year, and they have a little bit of a challenge to overcome in that we've often seen them play really well at the beginning of the season at warm-up and then kind of slow down as the year goes along. But I have to say, I was pretty impressed with not only the star players on this team, but the depth that we saw from them throughout the tournament.
They passed the eye test. That's for sure. I mean, obviously, people know about Aiden Downey, and I think most of our fans are probably pretty familiar with Adam Miller, but maybe they don't know Jake Powell as well. Maybe they don't know Ian Krosky. Like there are players that on the Georgia team that people are starting to learn more about. But like you mentioned, I think everybody's going to be a little hesitant to go all in, to push all the chips into the middle of the table here, given the past results of Georgia teams that have struggled to maintain a consistent level over the course of the year. But flashing this kind of ceiling, you can't be mad about that.
Well, we're going to talk a lot about this warm-up tournament, and to do so, we're going to bring in our guest today, and that is Edward Stevens, Athens-based Ultiworld reporter and college editor at Ultiworld. Edward, welcome to the program.
Hey guys, great to be here.
Well, it's so great to have you. Let's start with Georgia. We were talking a bit about them and kind of how deep they looked. What did you see from Georgia over the course of the weekend?
I saw a lot of high-flying plays. I mean, we see it a lot with Aiden Downey and Adam Miller. We've gotten really used to the pair of them as playmakers, both downfield and throwing the disc, and then as well as on defense. We've seen that from them going back to their 2021 run to the national final. But this year in particular, Georgia has seen so many other playmakers step up and be able to contribute huge moments on a regular basis. So you mentioned Jake Powell in the opening. He has the keys to that offense whenever Adam Miller and Aiden Downey aren't on the O-line, which is a lot of the time. They seem to be starting on D-line. And then they crossed over for basically the entirety of the semifinal game against UMass and then sporadically throughout the rest of the tournament. But that is right now, that's basically Jake Powell's offense. He has full field hucks. He makes some really nifty, kind of spectacular catches. He's a sneaky good athlete. He's got Cole Chandler and Cole Kruke there next to him, who are big playmakers, who are seniors and fifth year for Georgia as well. And then on the defensive end, both Jack Krugler and Scotty Whitley kind of had insane tournaments. Those two can launch themselves out of a cannon at a moment's notice. And even though he didn't play on Saturday or Sunday, he tweaked something on Friday. Kofi Reeves-Miller also is kind of in that big playmaking group for Georgia. All of these guys can basically go toe-to-toe with most of the best athletes on most other great teams. And that makes a huge difference at this level.
They remind me, as someone who lived in and grew up in Georgia, they remind me a little bit of Georgia teams of old. Having a couple of names people know who bring a ton of offensive skill, and then a lot of unfamiliar players, a lot of players who can grind against top level competition, players who maybe don't have elite club experience but have been playing in the regional club scene and benefited from those opportunities. So I think you're seeing a team that does have depth that can get production from players 10 through 18, even against top level competition. Looking at their record from the weekend, they take just the one loss to Carleton by one goal. What was their most impressive performance in your eyes, Edward?
I think their most impressive performance was the one against UMass in the semis. UMass is a great team. They were super, super, super good all warm up long. They have Wyatt Kelman, who was just unconscious on offense this weekend. And they have a defense that basically befuddled every other team that it faced. They gum up the lanes. They play smart poaches. They have good playmakers. And Georgia took that in a windy game and basically said, we can be patient when you need us to be patient. We can make our big plays when you need us to make our big plays. And whenever your offensive best players in Kalen McSweeney and Wyatt Kelman feel like they have the angles to get through our defense, we are going to shut it down. They ran a diamond zone that was pretty reminiscent of the one we see from Machine in the club division. Basically, throughout that game, and Adam Miller took the kind of point of the diamond, the short, deep, middle roll, and was brilliant there, getting several layout blocks. Aiden Downey stayed in the deep space. That's one of the reasons why he played 20 or 21 out of the 21 or 22 points that game, so he could stay on the field. And it was a different way for them to win than I think I saw at any other point during the weekend. And yeah, I think that was the most impressive victory. The caliber of the opponent was huge, and it kind of took a different gear. So I liked seeing them be able to adjust.
Brown was a little bit shorthanded this weekend. No Cam Kearney. Leo Gordon limited a little bit, and yet they still made the final. They got some immense performances from Jacques Nissen, but they didn't really come close in that final against Georgia. Do you find this weekend encouraging or discouraging for Brown, knowing what you do about this team and its roster makeup and what they did last season?
Extremely encouraging. I have zero reservations about Brown moving forward. Jacques was unbelievable. He put up 11 assists in the semifinal against Minnesota. Then he threw the first 5 assists against Georgia and caught the 6th goal. Those were all 6 of their goals during half. And these are mostly not run-of-the-mill assists. Every now and then they work it up to the goal line, and Jason Tapper or Cal Nightingale makes a nice cut and Jock hits him with an easy goal. But for the most part, these are high-difficulty shots, the kinds of throws that in the college division and almost anywhere we only see Jacques Nissen hit with regularity. He might have been the best player at the tournament. Adam Miller also made a case, and Wyatt Kelman made a case. I think they were the 3 best overall. But yeah, he was great. He did it all without his main target historically, who has been Leo Gordon. Gordon was on the field, but because he's coming back from an injury, he was pretty much just in the backfield. So he showed off some nice throws. He did a little bit of the nice Brown weave, but he was not kind of like the fireball, throwing up the deuces, getting in people's faces the way he has been in the past. So we had to see a different group of receivers for Brown. And I thought one thing they did that was really smart was alternate who the play call was for deep. They did this in just about every game in the first half. They had a different player be the deep cutter for Jock for 5 or 6 points in a row on offense, basically getting everybody used to the timing, the spaces, the kind of looks he's looking for. And I think it's really going to pay dividends for them later in the year. One thing I didn't see from Brown was a lot of defensive pressure, but when Cam Kearney comes back, he is so fast, so big, and he has such good hands that he is just going to change the whole landscape of their defense. So yeah, I'm really high on Brown after having seen them this weekend.
I am shocked that I think I just heard you talk about Brownie in Motion's 2024 team for like 2.5 minutes without mentioning Eli Chang. I just thought that was going to be like right on the tip of your tongue.
Okay, so he's great. Eli Chang is really, really good. He is probably the second best rookie I saw at Warmup this weekend. He's tremendous. He's got great defensive instincts. In their quarterfinal against Northeastern, Brown were down 3 goals with the cap on and had to get 2 breaks to win it. Elliot Rosenberg had a really nice tournament. He had a hand block to set up one of them. And then Eli Chang, I can't remember which came first, but I'm pretty sure it was on Universe. Eli Chang came through with the layout block to set up their game winner. He's really good. He's going to be really special. And yeah, definitely one of the rookies to watch moving forward.
Yeah, well, it begs the question, who is the rookie that you saw that impressed you more?
I was hoping you would ask. He did not get a lot of video coverage or reporting coverage because, frankly, the team didn't do all that well this weekend, results-wise. But I'm telling y'all, Mark Henke, even with Tobias Brooks and Will Selfridge out there, Mark Henke of Texas A&M might be the best rookie in the country. That guy can do it all. He's already leading every single thing that A&M does. He plays the best defense on the team. He plays the best offense on the team. He's a playmaking finisher. He's got throws all day. Cannot wait to see what A&M can build around him in the future. They're kind of a side note tournament-wise, but put Mark Henke's name on the marquee. That guy can ball.
Tobias Brooks about to do the Jordan meme, and I took that personally, and we'll see what happens in South Central Regionals. But yeah, I mean, can A&M compete for a nationals bid, do you think?
I don't know if they can this year. I haven't checked to find out what year everybody is. I think his name's Tim Mosher, had a nice tournament. I think, and they beat Minnesota. They beat a really good Minnesota team. They definitely have the punch. I don't think I saw the kind of consistency that you'd want out of a team that can make nationals. And in the South Central, they know they're going to have to deal with Texas, who are awesome at warm-up. Shout out John Clyde for throwing the best hammers I've seen in 3 or 4 college seasons. They're going to have to deal with Colorado, most likely. We haven't seen them play yet, but assume they're going to be good. They look good at CCC when I saw them in the fall. And they're going to have to deal with a really, really nice Wash U team. So the path is difficult, and they're like a little inconsistent, but the future looks really bright.
Well, so I'm curious where you would take us next. Like, what is the next biggest story from Warmup? Because I feel like there's a lot of different options. Just like when you were lining up that potential rookie, I was like, is he going to go Mark Henke or is he going to go William Wettengale? I wasn't sure which direction you were going to go. But now I want to give you more license to choose where our next stop should be. What's the next biggest story to talk about from this tournament? Because there's so many.
I think the next biggest story has to be the massive Cinderella-sized debut of University of Alabama Huntsville Nightmares. They are the real deal. They finished tied for 7th at this tournament. They didn't weather shortened the bracket rounds, so we didn't get a 7th place game between them and Northeastern, which I would have liked to see. But Alabama Huntsville has, in my opinion, kind of come out of nowhere and are absolutely a nationals quality team. If you haven't seen the hype around the roster they've built, the big splashy thing they did was sign Kenny Taylor. Kenny's a great player for Atlanta Chain Lightning. He's been coming up and become a really, really good starter for them over the last couple of seasons. And he found out he had a 6th year of college eligibility. He has some friends who play on the Alabama Huntsville team and joined them, but they are much, much deeper than just Taylor. They've got a bunch of players who have played Birmingham Alliance, Huntsville Space Force, Second Nature, guys with chemistry together going back 4 or 5 years in the club division who have been building over time and have a really, really solid, disciplined, and fun playmaking when they need to team. They came out and smashed Wisconsin to open the tournament as kind of an appetizer, then played within 1 point of Tufts, and then won out all their games. They played regional rivals Florida in a game that was absolutely not a contest at all. Huntsville took the first half 7-0, won the game 13-3, and in what I think was the greatest indicator of their potential for success, Florida's a good team. Florida can get breaks on anybody. They bid everywhere. Alabama Huntsville only turned it twice all game on any possession. They scored on 13 out of 15 possessions that they had, and both turnovers were upwind huck attempts that just hung up a little bit short. They play great defense. They have players like Michael Poe and Jonathan Sillivant who can sky anybody. They've got Kenny Taylor running the point. It's a really, really good team. I love what they can do. They might earn a second bid for the Southeast, and if they get it, then I think they're the favorites to make nationals alongside Georgia out of the Southeast.
Yeah, I mean, the results they look like the early returns for a team that can earn a bid. They get big blowout wins. They beat BYU. They lose close to UMass and Texas, 2 teams that are likely to finish inside the top 10 this season. And so we'll see. I think they're probably going to need that bid, though. I don't think Georgia, as good as they are, would like to see UAH in the regional final with 1 bid on the line.
I don't think they would either. That's the kind of situation Georgia got into back in, I think it was 2018. I might have my year wrong, when there was only 1 bid in the Southwest. Georgia were the lead dogs, and a really deep Auburn side stole it from them in the regional final. And yeah, they definitely don't want to see that kind of situation again, because UAH, I don't think would be the favorites in that matchup, but would absolutely be capable of winning that game.
All right, we have to talk about Carleton, because Carleton goes 6-1. They get 1-point wins over both of the finalists, Brown and Georgia, but then they lose to their regional rivals, Minnesota, in quarters before winning a placement game against Northeastern. Altogether, a good weekend, a very good weekend even. But it feels like they left something on the table when they lose to Minnesota. Where is Cut right now?
I think they're top 8, borderline top 5 team. I think they're a borderline push for semis team right now. When their O-line is clicking, they are hard to touch. I did a little thing in the Friday night subscriber piece where I ranked all the O-lines that we had in the top 8 at that moment in the kind of Florida warm-up standings, and I ranked them second right behind UMass. Declan Miller, Daniel Chen, Cullen Baker, and Finn Furman are so smooth with the disc. They run their little button hook quick resets. They hit their swings really well. And then when they need a big play, every single one of them is capable of making that throw or making that catch. I think that's going to be an incredibly difficult team to break. And when we talk about them leaving something on the table, I think that's true results-wise. But I do want to note that Leo Zhao drives that D-line offense for them typically. And it looked like he got injured and was no longer playing for most of the end of Saturday and Sunday. And I think in really tight games like the one that they lost against Minnesota, having him there, he's a great defender as well. But particularly after the turn, if once they get Leo Zhao back, they are more likely in a close game to be able to prevail. But yeah, I like what I see out of Carleton. I feel like this year and next year are their 2 shots to actually compete for, I don't know, maybe a title the way Carleton teams of old have done. They seem like they're in a really good spot to me right now.
They're my pick right now. They're going to open next year as a top 3 or 4 team in the power rankings. I mean, like, they're just in the right spot to keep getting better. You know, what they had Tej Murthy, they have Declan's class coming up in next year, and so they'll be even stronger. Like, I think we're going to be really hype on Cut going into 2025, but maybe they're pushing that timeline up. Then again, we don't know if they're going to be the best team in the North Central right now. Minnesota showed some real chops too. So right now, the excitement for best team in the North Central, best team in New England, looking very compelling with some elite teams in both of those different regions.
Yeah, I'll say. I mean, you mentioned Gray Duck. Paul Krennic was out of his mind as a downfield cutter this weekend. He was simply unstoppable back there. And I think Gray Duck did something really smart. Last year, they had all of Ian McCoskey, Paul Krennic, Sebastian Brower, Anthony Jurley, and Max DeLynn on their O-line together. This year, they have shifted DeLynn and Jurley over to the D-line. They still cross over to the O-line for big points, but that has given their D-line a whole lot more pop without really taking any of the potency away from the offense either. So they've got Ian McCoskey's a lefty with really nice hammers, really nice break throws. They have brought in Austin Jin, who is coming into his own. He had some good plays last year, but this year he's now a more of a feature part of their offense. And then Sebastian Brower had, I think, the tournament of his life, everything I've seen from him so far. And Krennic was the best cutter on the field this weekend, I think, out of anybody, anywhere. This is a really good Grey Duck team. Better than last year, I think, almost certainly.
Last team I want to talk about, the other semifinalist, and really, I think the team that I expected after a couple days of play to win this tournament, and that is Massachusetts. I mean, they had the best results in the early going of this tournament than anybody. I mean, they, you look at common opponents and their score margins. I mean, they were killing teams, and then they lost pretty soundly to Georgia. I was very surprised by that. I think Massachusetts was probably a 4-point favorite in my mind going into that game. So I mean, you already talked about how Georgia won that game, but what happened for Massachusetts there? They followed that up by crushing Minnesota in the placement game. Are they still a title contender this season?
Yeah, 100%. I mentioned how good Wyatt Kelman was on offense. At times, even when they were winning, the offense was a bit one note in the sense that they would keep it moving a lot of the times until somewhere in the middle of the field, Wyatt Kellman, with some kind of crazy split second decision, would see a look that he really liked, throw an incredible throw, and hit it. He did that time and time and time again throughout the tournament. He was missing a little bit, and partly because of the rain and wind conditions in the semi against Georgia. And because Luca Harwood is hurt right now, they didn't necessarily have a consistent backup look for when things weren't quite running perfectly for Kelman. So I think when Luca comes back, he's really going to change and augment that group. But also, I didn't quite see the same level of throwing execution from them team wide that I did last season. I'd like to see a little bit more. The D line wasn't quite as sharp hitting their break throws, although they were really sharp on defense. Nima Lama, Jay Lee, Isaac Kaplan all played really good defense. They didn't. One thing they're missing from last year, I don't want to harp on this, we've mentioned this in a couple previews, but Jonas Stang Osborne is taking the year off. And one thing we saw from them at last year's warm-up that continued throughout the season is on some of those D points, they could end the break in a single throw with Jonas Stang Osborne throwing it deep to somebody like Toby Paperno. This weekend at warm-up, we didn't see that same kind of quick strike capability. We saw a D-line offense that was composed and good at times. They worked together well. Jaden Bush ran a lot of those points really well, but we didn't see the back-breaking quick strikes that we saw last year. So that's a change, and it will be interesting to see how they approach that difference in their roster going forward.
Well, Edward, thank you so much. Super exciting start to the season, and we just keep it rolling with Queen City coming up. So appreciate you coming on and talking about warm-up with us.
It's been a pleasure, guys. Thanks so much.
Edward Stevens, Ultiworld College editor. He'll be at Smoky Mountain Invite next. We'll see a lot of these teams again. Thanks, Edward. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back on Deep Look. And welcome back to Deep Look. Thanks again to Edward Stevens for joining us. Keith, just final thoughts on an exciting warm-up to start the year.
It's hard to digest everything that occurred. We had some great live streams, great games. Certainly, if you weren't there to watch them as they were being broadcast live, there's plenty worth going back to see. We didn't talk about, there's buzz about Cincinnati coming in, Pittsburgh, they narrowly miss a chance in the top 8 because of their, 4 or 5 goal loss to Minnesota. So there are other storylines lurking below the surface at this tournament. And we even talked a lot about all the different things that happened at the top, but I think it paints a picture of a really compelling season, assuming that somebody can catch UNC.
That is the big question. We will see them in action this weekend at Queen City. We'll make our picks in just a little bit. Got a couple of other notes to get to. First, want to talk about the European Ultimate Indoor Club Championships. The women's final was an epic. Keith, set the stage for us.
Yeah, it's really, you've got the Swedes taking on Atletico in this indoors format, which is really popular in Europe, and just come down the stretch. And not only was it a really close game with a ton of big plays, but you had a really loud and engaged crowd. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me with the clip that got shared in our Discord by Ravi Vasudevan. So I thought it was a really an excellent watch and a good case for why indoor could potentially be the spectator future of Ultimate. I can imagine a world in which this format is more exciting than the 7-on-7 format that we all love so much.
I'm not so sure about that, but let's take a look and a listen to the end of this women's final.
The high fives, so that's at low fives, seemed amicable. They're talking right into each other's
They
ears.
have to. But the atmosphere in here is absolutely sensational. Vestman now getting us back underway.
It's Universe Point, 14-14.
Again, you've got to go for it. If not now, then when? Again, 2 layouts, every single inch being used. Every little moment counts. It's a big hammer to Lena over the top, and it's Atletico gold at the European Indoor Championships 2024. What a huge play. It eventually went their way, but that game
Hammers
changed
OP
hands
indoors.
all the time.
There you go. So what a game, what a finish. Keith, there is something about being inside and the energy created by the crowd. It's exactly what we saw at WCC 2018 when we had to go inside because of the lightning.
Yeah, I mean that clip right there was more energy than I've seen at like any semi-pro game ever. Like the crowd was just so bought in, and I mean, look at the effect of the play. You got 2 gigantic indoor layouts, of which there are many in this game. I think it's for us Americans who are probably not getting out on court surface. I think it probably seems like absolutely nuts, but I think it's a little more common there. But it really just an exciting way to end. I do agree with you about indoor. I do think it's a little too easy to throw. Like it seems so hard to play defense. I've not watched that much indoor, but it seems really difficult to get turnovers. So the throwing ability is just really at a high clip. So there's some things to work out, but I can buy it.
That's what we want to see from Brock Purdy this weekend in the Dome in Las Vegas. So thanks to Ulti TV for the footage, and you can check out the entire game and the other finals from the tournament on their YouTube channel. Also, we've got this. I haven't actually watched this clip yet, Keith. I have not seen this clip.
Oh,
I have seen it discussed, but I haven't watched it. So I will be seeing this in real time. Behind the back throw. And so let's roll the clip. And Keith, tell the listeners what we're seeing.
So this is Austin Hasbrook from Utah Zion Curtin. Just
Oh my God.
uncorking the perfect back corner throw behind the back. Just casual
Like, this
as you
is
like.
And it's like an OI perfect to the back cone.
Look at the defense.
question is, did he
Look at
need-
the defense. I mean,
did
the
he
defense
need
is
to
like,
do
what
that?
were we supposed to do about that?
But like, did he need to do that? Now the swag is on 100 for that throw for sure. But like, couldn't he just stepped over and thrown a regular backhand?
I don't know. I mean,
guess the mark
look
might
at
have
where the
reacted.
mark is. Right. Look at where the mark is positioned when you step back the other way. The mark was completely focused on keeping the disc back from coming back towards the middle of the field. And so that opens that up. I mean, I've envisioned that play in my head before. Like I've messed around with that specific behind back throw almost exactly. And I've like kind of envisioned the scenario in which it might work. And being on the goal line is kind of the optimal situation for it. That's not the first back-to-back behind the back we've ever seen in like high level ultimate, but that's one of the most like arcing ones that I've ever seen. You know, usually the times I've seen it, it's been like, you know, a 5-10 yard throw or something like that. And that was like all the way to the back coat. Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. All right. Let's talk about the Super Series from the UFA, the league formerly known as the AUDL. And they've got their new schedule out for the Super Series. We got a graphic coming for you in just a second. And it's essentially like high profile, many cross-divisional matchups that are going to be, you know, the broadcast by the league. So they bring the kind of higher level of production value. So I'll just run through the games really quick. Starting on April 27th, DC versus Salt Lake. Then we got New York versus Atlanta on May 4th, Minnesota versus Madison, Atlanta versus Colorado, Colorado versus Minnesota, Salt Lake versus New York, Indy versus Colorado, and New York versus Minnesota. So a heavy dose of the Wind Chill, the Empire, the Breeze, and Salt Lake. And so, Keith, you know, not every team has been represented here. How do you feel about this as kind of the new backbone of the feature games from the UFA?
Okay, but I want to respond to that, but there's something distracting me about this. What is happening with the E in the word super right now?
It's a
What is
super
happening?
E.
I I I don't understand. I don't get that. Anyway, yeah, I mean, look, this is uh, I'm a bit surprised by the way that this is structured. You know, you definitely you're getting your fair share of New York and the wind chill. I wouldn't think of them as being one of the marquee teams in the league, but 3 wind chill games. You get Madison, Indy, Atlanta, and 1 DC game. Just 1 for DC. No Austin. Basically, no one for the West Coast. Uh, no Boston, no DC, no Carolina, or excuse me, not no DC, no Philly, no Carolina. I'm a little surprised at the way this is structured, and maybe there was kind of a decision from the league, like, hey, let's focus on really the marquee teams, and maybe Minnesota's one of those teams in the way that I don't know. Obviously, they put together a really exciting season last year. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're not a great team. I just wouldn't expect them to be the most promoted team aside with the Empire in this season.
They also got shellacked when they went on the road to Colorado. They got just crushed in that game. Well, yeah, I think, Keith, what I'm seeing here, this is an attempt to make things exciting by having good teams play each other more during the regular season, which I love that. You know, having more cross-divisional games, seeing Salt Lake playing both DC and New York this season, those are going to be super fun. I also think they're trying to put the broadcasts in stadiums where there's good fan turnout. That's why Madison is in this, right? I mean, there is no other explanation for a very mediocre Madison team to get a game in this, besides the fact that they get good fans. And so I think they want to make the game look presented as in the best way possible to potential viewers. This is, however, a reduction in the number of kind of game of the week type games that the league is producing. So, fewer games, maybe better games on average, and a little bit more of a smaller geographical profile because of that. I think some teams are certainly going to feel like they're getting unfairly left out.
Austin. Excuse me.
Yeah.
No, but for real, where's I don't understand why we're not like Austin. We got to watch Austin play the dregs of the league like 8 times a year. We can't get them a marquee matchup. Come on.
I know. I feel like, yeah, you could send one of the good teams down to Austin and there'd probably be a great crowd. So I feel like they could have done it.
Might be hot though.
Instead, Indy gets a game. Indy, Colorado. It's going to be a beatdown at altitude. Yikes. Okay, so I think it's time to get some picks, Keith. We got to talk a little college ultimate once again. Queen City tune-up coming up this weekend. We also have the D3 Grand Prix, a new tournament out west. And so let's dive into this Queen City. Always an interesting tournament. UNC, of course, the favorite in both divisions. But let's talk a little bit about these matchups and then make our picks for the finals and the winner.
Which division you want to start in?
Let's start in the women's division.
All right. Our first chance to see some of the big East Coast teams. Like you mentioned, our top seeds, North Carolina, and then Vermont, Tufts, and Carleton. So Carleton going to bring some of that connectivity back from the West Coast. And I'm sure there will be some upsets throughout the bottom of the pools, but it would not shock me to see those top 4 finish in the top 4 of their pools and potentially give us some dramatic semifinals. That's often, I feel like, been the pattern at Queen City Tune-Up. So there's a lot of teams that are like, national level or just below, like just at the regional level that populate the rest of these pools. But these are 4 teams that I think, at least 3 teams that feel like they have semifinal potential, and we'll find out about Tufts here at this tournament. When you look down the line beyond that top 4, are there any teams you're particularly intrigued by?
I'm pretty curious to see what Virginia does this year. I think they're a little underseeded at 7. Northeastern up at 5 doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think that team's going to take a pretty big step back with Claire Stewart leaving the team. I'm also pretty curious about Minnesota. I feel bad that they ended up in a pool with Carleton, but that's a team that showed us a lot last year, that brings a lot of players back. And can they maybe finish second in that pool? Or, hey, maybe they can upset Carleton. I don't think I'd pick that. Carleton is so stacked this year. But I like Minnesota to maybe get into a quarterfinal. Unfortunately for them, I think it might be that they end up having to play. No, because they have pre-quarters. 2D plays into a game against the winner of Pool C, which would presumably be Tufts. Minnesota Tufts quarter. I'd love to see what happens.
Yeah, Virginia, I'll be curious to see what they look like. They didn't exactly get off to a sterling start in, I think, a weather impacted opening tournament, but the other team that I'm really curious about is Georgia. Where are we going to see the Quincy Booth team get carried this year? Like, I mean, they have her and Fiona Cashin. Like, have they developed some depth around those players? Is this a team that we can see be more than just like, oh, they're going to be able to dominate the Southeast, then get to nationals? Can they compete with elite level teams? Could they maybe be a threat at nationals? After what we saw from Quincy Booth at nationals last year, you have to think that there's a chance that this team is going to take a big step forward. So they're one of the teams I think I'm most curious about watching in the women's division.
I'm not going to stray too much in my picks, though. I think at the end of the day, I got to go UNC and Vermont in that finals matchup, and I'm taking Carolina. I think the time will come when Carolina gets a very serious test and maybe loses a game for the first time in like 4 years. But for now, has Pleiades lost? No, and they won't after this weekend either. I got Carolina taking it down.
Yeah, I'm not going to be the one to bet against UNC. So I'll save that for somebody else. Somebody else can one day I'll be holding the bag. Eventually they'll lose a game, but I think you're going to collect a lot along the way. I'm actually going to take Carleton to reach semifinals. They got an extra tournament under their belt, so I think that they'll be perhaps a little bit further along than where we see Vermont. They'll add a couple of players probably back that they didn't get to take with them to California. So I'm going to take Carleton as the other finalist, but I'm going to stick with UNC as our winner here.
I am curious about how you expect that to play out, Keith, given that they are set to meet North Carolina in a semifinal if they win their pool, which they probably will do. Are you sure that is your final answer?
Yeah. I guess in my head, I feel like Carleton is the 3 seed, not Tufts. That is tricky.
They probably should be, but
yeah, I think that they should be, but they're not. Yeah, then I don't know that I can buy Tufts.
I mean, I should just let you take the L. I should just let you take the L.
You could have. I might have noticed by the time that when I'm actually like looking at it. Yeah, I unfortunately then I think I got to be in the same boat as you with UVM. I can't buy Tufts.
So you need Minnesota to upset Carleton in pool play, get everybody hyped up, and then they beat Tufts in semis or in quarters, and then they beat Vermont in semis. It's possible. I don't think it's probable.
Why can't UNC just lose to Georgia? That could just open everything up.
That would be wild. Quincy Booth show. All right, men's side, UNC number 1 seed, NC State, Penn State the 3 seed. Wow, and Alabama Huntsville, after their weekend, moves up into the 4 seed slot. They actually had to change the seeding, and that's the right thing to do. I feel like UAH, honestly, should probably be seated ahead of Penn State, but that's okay. I think this is going to be a really interesting tournament. Does the Penn State hype really materialize in a finals run? I think for me, I need to see them win this pool without problems, and then they would face. If they win Pool C, they'll face the winner of 2D 3A. And so I feel like that, that's probably a game against South Carolina. Another game I need to see them win if I'm going to really buy into the Penn State hype train. If they can then take out NC State in semis, then now we're really talking. So I'm really interested in what this Penn State team can do. For Alabama Huntsville, it's more of can you get to that semi against UNC and then lose? That would be a great weekend for them, I think. So I'm not so sure that there's many teams beyond the top maybe 6 that can really challenge this weekend, but I'm curious what you think, Keith.
Well, there's some Penn State hype in the chat right now, as well as some JMU hype. I can't tell even what's sarcastic though about PSU and JMU hype, because this is not the first year we've seen it. So there may be some a little bit tongue in cheek in the chat as well. I just look, same thing as in the women's division. I'm disappointed that UAH is not in the 3 seeds hole, where they could potentially play into the final, and where we could get to see them against NC State. I could very well see a picture where they both win their pool as well as UNC. We don't even get to see them make a deep run. That would be disappointing to me. Also, they're going back to back here after a lengthy tournament in Florida. This is not a light lift. I do think that could have an impact on their ability to perform. So maybe that's the equalizer that pushes them down to the 4 seed, because I think their resume is more impressive than anybody else besides UNC, basically. So we'll see if that has an impact on UH. It is something to monitor, but I do think we're going to get that UAH South Carolina game on the live stream as a little preview. I do think we'll get that one. So that's hype. You asked about beyond the top 6. Look, I like UNC Charlotte. I like South Carolina. I like Penn State. I think those are all solid teams, but I don't think any of them look untouchable if a team like Wilmington or Ohio State, or even, like a William & Mary, we've seen these teams have good weekends before. So I don't think it's a lock. I think you're very likely, though, that one of those 3 teams will take the last semifinal slot, depending on how things break out. I think, like, if I were just picking from those 3 teams in, the Royal Rumble, I think I would take South Carolina to be the best of the 3. But I don't know, if the fact that they have to play UAH first, or how the bracket's exactly going to shape up, if that's going to make it tougher for South Carolina to be the team that takes that 3rd spot in the semifinals. But you did mention that Penn State path could go directly into South Carolina if they go to seed. So, that's kind of my take on beyond the top 6. Like, maybe there's a chance we see something from Ohio State or Wilmington, but I'm not sure if there's anybody quite down the line who I'm feeling too ecstatic about. But there's some teams I'm curious about. McGill, Notre Dame, William & Mary, Case. These are all teams I'm like intrigued by, but certainly not ready to think like, oh, these are teams that could win bids and take the semifinal spot.
The only thing I want to note is, like, we got to give Penn State its due. Like, they earned a 3 seed by playing really well at kickoff. They lost by 2 to NC State in the opener. They played the closest game of anybody against UNC. For instance, South Carolina, which went 5-1, their loss to North Carolina 15-8. So, I think Penn State proved that they were that next team after NC State and UNC, of course, at kickoff. The question is, did UAH's resume, how will that stand up from warm-up this weekend? It's nice to have that immediate crossover, and we'll see what happens. Also, teams going to get a chance to scout UAH on tape a little bit and see about some defensive looks against a team that was otherwise essentially unknown coming into this year. So lots of teams with buzz. Who will show up and put up a good performance? We will find out this weekend. Keith, you got the first picks here.
Yeah, and it's not exciting, but I'm gonna take the top 2 seeds like we did in the women's division. I'm taking UNC and NC State, and I'm taking UNC to win. I honestly would be compelled by UAH if the bracket were different shaped and if they didn't just play last weekend. But yeah, there's nothing I've seen that takes me off of that top 2 otherwise.
Yeah. Oof. I just want to pick Penn State, but I'm not sure that I believe. They already took the loss to NC State. I feel like South Carolina could upset them in a quarterfinal, or UAH, depending on who they get there. I'm sticking there with you. I think I got to go top 2 seeds this weekend. I think NC State has proven that they're a cut above. So I've got UNC over NC State. Looking at our picks from last weekend really quick, Keith had UMass over Georgia. So it gets Georgia to the final, which great call, Keith. Really impressive. I did not see that one coming. I had Brown over Pittsburgh. So we basically got the same amount of points at the end of the day. Pittsburgh, disappointing. We didn't talk to Edward about that, but man, they did not have a great weekend at Warmup. And I know they missed out on a bracket spot narrowly, but still not super impressive considering what I expected from them.
Yeah, they only lost one game, but they didn't. I don't think they looked that good in their wins. Definitely a bit of a rocky start for them, and unfortunate that the picks aren't weighted in some way that my Boulder pick doesn't award me any more points. But hey, that's the game we play, so I'll take my point and my bragging rights, and I'll be happy with that.
Queen City is not the only tournament that will be live streamed this weekend for Ultiworld subscribers. You can also tune into the D3 Grand Prix happening out in Portland, Oregon. Great to get a little bit of additional D3 coverage, and I'm so excited to see a new D3 tournament popping up that's pulling a lot of good teams from the West Coast. On the men's side, Lewis and Clark, Whitman, Claremont, and Pacific Lutheran, your top 4 seeds. A little top heavy on the men's side. Keith, who you taking?
Oh, well, you got 2 teams that are ranked inside the top 10. And so, I will say power ranking D3 teams is pretty hard. There's limited information. Teams change a lot from year to year, but hard to get away from 2 top 10 teams against a field of unranked teams. So I am going to take Whitman and Lewis and Clark. Although there's not really, this is just a round robin, I think, in the men's division. So there's not really a final per se, but I guess I'll take those to be the top 2 teams in the standings by the time the weekend's over.
Give me Whitman to win that Lewis and Clark game. I agree that those 2 teams will pull away from the pack.
I'm gonna take LNC because I was high on them going into D3 Nationals last year and they disappointed me, and I'm gonna come back for them. I'm gonna say, hey, it was my fault. I was too early.
They are 9 and 10 in the rankings, Whitman and Lewis and Clark, respectively. On the women's side, a little bit of a stronger field. Carleton College Eclipse making the trip out to Oregon. They're playing Portland, Whitman, Lewis and Clark, even Oregon State there as a D1 team. So Eclipse, a fantastic team. We know that. They are number 2 in the rankings right now behind Middlebury. Portland is the 3, and Whitman is the 6. So you've got a lot of heavy hitters. I think I have to take Carleton. I just feel like they might in D3 sometimes, the gradation from 1 to 10 is actually really steep, and the teams at the top are a lot better than the team at 10th in the rankings. That can be magnified on the women's side. I like Eclipse here, but they do have to play on the road, if you will. So can Portland or Whitman make a charge? We'll see. I'm going to take Whitman for that second spot ahead of Portland. They do play it's round robin, and then they play a final. So the top 2 seeds will play again. Maybe we'll get a split.
There's another top 10. There's another top 10 team in this field, Colorado College. They're the number 7 team in our power rankings, but they're 6th seed in this tournament. I don't know why. Somebody's wrong about this, or maybe they're not bringing their full roster. I don't know. Maybe they were like, "Hey, don't seed us that high." But the field fills out even more when you add in another top 10 squad to the mix. I definitely feel like it's not a long bridge to go out to be excited about Carleton Eclipse this year. They bring back a lot of talent from last year. Rowan Dong is someone who I thought was awesome last season for them at Nationals. So, I want to get behind Carleton, but I will say that the travel is not something I want to completely ignore. You're right that you don't see a ton of teams that are really further down the rankings upsetting the teams in the elite tiers. So, with you really are looking at these top 4 with Colorado College and it being the 4th. I think I want to take Portland over Carleton, but I think I'm going to stick with those top 2. So I think I'm going to go with Portland over Carleton. I don't feel super confident though.
All right. Well, those are our picks for this weekend. You can watch both tournaments live on ultiworld.com. Get yourself a subscription at ultiworld.com/subscribe. Standard and all access subscribers get all of the games. It's been really fun so far to watch games from home in New York City and be able to really feel like you can stay a part of the action throughout the year. Lots of highlights and stuff coming from Warmup as well in the next couple days. Before we go, we have a question of the week to get to. And then I have a bonus question from the chat. So we'll hit that afterwards. But the question of the week, first up, is about Florida College Ultimate. And the question, I'm pulling it up here. Of course, I lost it in my notes. And it is from Matt. Florida schools went 5-22 at Florida Warmup. They went 3-20 against schools from outside of Florida. What has caused the decline of Florida College Ultimate? Is it as simple as the cyclical nature of college sports? Keith, I know you're going to have thoughts on this one.
Well, so I do. And, obviously this is talking about the men's division. And my background in Florida Ultimate is more steeped in the women's division. But I do think some of the same problems have occurred there. And as the answer to many questions, it's myriad factors. Like, I think that there is something to it being the cyclical nature of college ultimate. But I also, I saw before Florida Warmup, I think there was someone on UCF who tweeted like, we used to be like an elite team and now we're like unstreamable. Like they won't even consider putting us on stream, which, is some dark humor, but, part of it is that it is a difficult place to like build a strong ultimate community because of how spread out everything is. Like you have places that aren't really major metros, perhaps with the exception of Miami, but Miami is like, might as well be on the moon if you're in Gainesville, like it's so far away. So like you have the Gainesville and you have the Orlando community and then you have Miami, and like, it's kind of tricky to connect all of those different groups. And so that makes it tough for there to be sustainable club play there. We've seen mixed results from the club scene in the area. That's often why you see people deciding, oh, you know what, it's just easier for me to go up to Atlanta and play than it is for me to try and do something here. I also think because your ultimate communities are structured often around the college programs in the area and that you don't have major metros connected to those college programs, a lot of people who graduate from those programs leave to go to major metropolitan areas in other parts of the country. So it becomes tough to like really retain talent and build, pipelines there. And that affects coaching. When you don't have elite club players staying, it's harder to get good coaches. It's harder to have a good club opportunity. And like all that stuff feeds together. And then, in the men's division, I think that it's hard to separate the reputation that Florida Ultimate has rightfully, or if you feel differently, that they have obtained over the years for some of the times when Spirit was a real problem for them. You think back to some of the stuff we saw from Florida United, you think to the Cole and Brody days, that's been something that I think the region of play there has really reckoned with over the years. And I think that the reason that you saw that propagated so much was because some of the most influential people in the community, I think, came from an era of play when there was just not a lot of Spirit going on. And this part is a little more conjecture on my part, like a little more like what I've heard secondhand. It's not something I've experienced like really up close. But I do get the sense that there were some leaders in the community, like people who are really influential, who did not make Spirit a priority and sometimes even were like disregarded it altogether. And so that seeped into some of the other players in the community. And I think that did create an environment that made the teams a little harder to sustain and harder to keep together. So it's a bunch of different things, but that's the sense that I get from Florida Ultimate. And as other people pointed out on our Discord, not a lot of great youth ultimate down there. No notable high school programs, right? No YCC teams that you're really seeing. So like, where are you getting the talent from?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you described a little bit more like why Florida club teams aren't doing that hot anymore. But, specifically to the college scene, I think what you say is true, right? Lack of youth pipeline, more isolated metro areas. If you've never been to Florida, like stuff is far away from each other. Like,
it's
the
a big
easiest
state
flight
in
from
one
New York.
direction.
Like if I want to go to Tallahassee, I have some friends in Tallahassee. If I want to go to Tallahassee, I can connect to fly there from New York, but it's very expensive and annoying. Or I can fly to Jacksonville and then drive like 3 hours. And those are both in North Florida. And so like if you want to go from Jacksonville to Tampa, It's far. If you want to drive from Tampa to Miami, you don't. You like fly. It's crazy. So there's that isolation factor, which means that like who comes there to go to the school, that's what you've got. You're not getting people coming up in the youth scene and then going to they grow up in Gainesville playing youth ultimate and then they go to UF and then they they have this sustainable team. You think about, I think it's actually more notable that those schools were really good at one point. And what drove that? What drove that was amazing individual talents that then they were able to build a team around because of those players recruiting, getting a coach who was involved for the time period that those great players were there. If you think about Roca at UCF, you think about the crew that was together at Florida State with Chris LaRock and Andrew Roney. And, you had Florida back in the day with Kurt and Brody and Cole. But like these amazing individual talents, players who are some of the best college players ever, happen to come into those programs and turn them into a college, nationals powerhouse for 2 or 3 seasons. And then when those players graduate, there's nothing left. And so I don't really want to hear about, look at Carleton, so sustainable. Yeah, because Carleton gets the best rookies every single season. If you took the best high school ultimate players and they all went to Florida schools would be awesome ultimate teams. Like they just don't get those players. It's the same reason Metro East teams are bad, because they don't get those recruits. Now, you could talk about why. Once a team is bad, then if you're a great high school ultimate player, you're probably making a decision about where to go to college based on being on a competitive ultimate team. And that means you're not going to these schools. So I think it has a lot more to do. I think it's more exceptional that Florida teams were so good for many years than that they're not good now, given that they don't to get these kinds of recruits in. And there is no local scene to speak of to develop this over time.
Well, these are also massive universities. Like you're going to get some talent and athleticism just by virtue of volume. So like that's how I think you see them come into great players on occasion. They just you're getting a lot of shots. There's 30,000 in some cases more kids at your school. So you're going to see those teams, and that's something that happens occasionally in some of these big universities in the Southeast or whatnot. They just get the right group together. But I also think that I was talking about a lack of club is because that is a big part, I think, of what feeds good college programs. It's not just from the bottom up, the talent coming in, but where are you getting veteran leaders from? Where are your good players getting a chance to develop and become better and learn new strategies to bring back to your school?
True.
Where are you getting quality coaching from? Where are you getting infrastructure from local disc organizations to like give opportunities for play and stuff like that, support? Like, I think all of this stuff feeds together. You're right that you need the talent, but if there are places where without a lot of great youth recruiting, you can get good teams, and it's because you have the larger infrastructure that helps develop those programs. And I think that's hard to put together in Florida.
Yeah,
Emmett
Peter
pointed out
Vandenberg,
UCF is like 80K students. It is a largely commuter school. So 80K is misleading a little bit for UCF.
Peter Vandenberg came into FSU in 2010, and Chris LaRock started as a freshman that year. And then like Vandenberg stuck around the team and helped coach them. I think he was a great college coach as they had this awesome couple of players to build a team around. And that team eventually went to the semifinals of college nationals. And then those guys graduated and Vandenberg left because, you understand it. It's like your generation of players has come to an end. You're no longer really going to be competitive. I don't remember how many years he coached after, maybe a season or two before tapping out. But you see that. And I mean, you see what is more rare and should be coveted is when you have somebody like Calvin Lynn coaching at Texas for like 20 years. You don't get that because it's not a paid job in ultimate. So when you do have those opportunities for a coach to stick around and create the continuity that can otherwise lack a little bit in college ultimate, that's a big deal. All right, one more question, bonus question from the chat on the YouTube, and it comes from Blake. are UNC women minus odds to be undefeated for the season? And why don't we say for the regular season? Because I think we agree, Keith, that they're probably not quite minus odds to win the whole championship. But what about for the regular season?
Ooh, it's close. It's like if they are, I don't think it's by a lot. You assume that they're going. I think they're playing the East Coast Invite. Like we've seen them get really tested, once or twice a regular season, and we think that the group of elite teams around them is potentially good enough, and maybe UNC took a step back. So like I think it's close. Would I actually make it minus odds? Yeah, I think I would peg the market to make it minus odds. Yeah, I think I would go somewhere between like minus 130 and minus 150 for them to go undefeated.
I mean, I think you have to think about how many games are they going to be in where they could actually lose. It's probably like 3 or 4. And then, I mean, I actually think one of the best chances is that Vermont beats them this weekend.
Yes,
It's
agreed.
not out of the question. It's not out of the question, and it's early. And they're dealing with big turnover on their O-line. Like, it is not crazy to me to think that Vermont could beat them this weekend. So, if you gave me plus 150 to UNC to go undefeated, I would bet it. If you gave me plus 100, I would really have to think about it. So I think it's very close to pick 'em.
Yeah, I don't think you're totally like, I think that it is close to pick 'em. That's why I'm really in that, like, if I am going to go minus, it's not by a lot.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of Deep Look. Thank you so much for tuning in to our first, not our first ever live show, but our first live show of this new era where we'll be live every Tuesday, noon Eastern. We'll take your questions from the chat and always look forward to having you with us here on the show. If you're listening on the podcast app, enjoy. Don't forget about our subscriber-only bonus segments that happen every single week. It is out the back. We'll be doing one for all the subs later today. So we'll see you there, and we'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.
You had to slip the Brock Purdy mention in there.